Before I get started, I just want to preface any critique or any um, observations of somebody else's work or programming with what I'm thinking in my own critique of something that I'm firstly looking at, and then there may be stuff that's on their program or the program that I need a little bit more awareness of or may misinterpret. And so this is what I use is a guideline is Prilbin's chart. It's something that of course Westside Barbell's used, a lot of other old Soviet time Olympic lifters, Olympic coaches, and it's just all it is. It's presenting the an optimal reps per set, optimal total reps and range of reps per percentage. And so it's all based on like your competition max. And so if you have 55 to 65% on the bar compared to your competition max, you're going to want to use the reps per set, 3 to 6. Optimal total amount of reps is 24, range of reps 18 to 30, and so on. So what this ultimately means, reps per set, 3 to 6, optimal total amount of reps, and then range of reps, 18 to 30, for 55 to 65%. What it can ultimately mean is you want to be able to use 55 to 65% for sets of 3 or sets of 6 or sets of 4, sets of 5, however it is. And your optimal total amount of reps is 24. So if you did sets of 6, you'd be doing 4 sets of 6. Just based on 24 divided by 6. If you wanted to do sets of 3 and your optimal total reps, your range is 24, then you'd be doing 8 sets of 3. But primarily, I would probably be using this rep range in the assistance exercises or the secondary exercises. And so these are all just observations over a duration of a long period of time with optimal athletes, gauging the speed at each percentage per reps per set per total amount of reps. So the point of this is to make sure that the speed of each percentage doesn't slow down and it remains the same for the entire duration of the set, is what I would observe. So over a duration of time, a period of time, when you just strictly follow this, and if it's honest enough, then you will slowly but surely understand what the speeds actually look like. Because if, say, you're doing 70 to 80%, and your optimal total reps is 18, and you're doing sets of 3, and so 18 divided by 3 is 6. So if you're doing 6 sets of 3 and the percentage that you're using is remaining at a particular speed, and you know that is 70 to 80%, 100% as far as a fact, because you can smoke it every time, or eventually you will be able to decipher whether or not a particular weight is within that range of 70 to 80%. If it's too slow, if it's not fast enough, then it's probably creeping into the ranges of 85, 90%. If it's too fast, you're going to be able to gauge whether it's 55 to 65%. And so thus can turn into this kind of hybrid rate of perceived exertion kind of idea, but the percentage wise is always good to have a guide, and this is what I've used as my guide. So just taking a first look at it, with all of that being said about Prilbin's chart, of course the order is something that to be noted. You have your maxes at the top, which is always good to make sure that you're aware of. You have your primary exercises. You have a Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday split. It seems like you do a lot of the primary exercises almost uh, every day, with the emphasis being on Sunday, of course, squats, Tuesday, bench, Thursday, deadlifts, and then go into your secondary and your secondary exercises. One of the things that this is just from my perspective is that I wouldn't do all three lifts in one day. That's just my prerogative. And we'll go ahead and break it down as we go along. But as far as what I'm seeing right now, 375 of 445 is what you're using for your top set for your Sunday, 235 for a set of 5, top set of 5 for your bench, and 395 of 475 for deadlifts. And then you're going into speed bench on Sunday, deficit deads, incline barbell, so more bench and some shoulders, some pod squats, and some bench. Okay, cool. So there's what I mean by it's hard to fail at writing programs is that as long as you're not missing weight, you're fine. So strictly looking at using Perelman's chart as a reference point for Sunday specifically, with your primary exercise being squats and your top set of 5 being at 375, which is 85% of 445, I would say you would be lacking volume. I would also structure it in a way that Boris Shako was really good at it, and it was an awesome indicator as far as how to structure percentages and not just having kind of a vague sets of this and sets of these reps and this duration of time that you need to be under the bar, like the amount of reps that you need. So when I look at something like that, what we could do is we can lower the reps, and then so you can increase the sets so you can get more volume, or what would end up happening is that we would either have to lower the weight, and to which we can then get the optimal amount of sets per rep scheme. And so I would just think that if it's moving fast enough, you can either add a couple more sets or lessen the weight so you can add a couple more sets in order to obtain your reps a more optimal volume metric as far as your primary exercise is concerned. So given that your working sets at 3 sets of 6 at 295 is around 66% of 445, that makes more sense than not necessarily saying it's wasted energy, but it seems like there's a lot of energy expenditure in the top set versus your working sets. And and there's one thing that we never want to do as far as my perspective is work backwards. My top set or my working sets will be the first and technically last thing that I do that is calculated, and then I'll go into my secondary exercises. So what I would look at when I see this with the 3 sets of 6, I see the 3 sets of 6 as a secondary exercise rather than working sets, just because as soon as I get done, if my plan was a top set of 5 at 375, I'm done going into my secondary exercise. And so if I were to look at this, I would almost say not necessarily reverse those, but take one out. It seems like we're trying to do a lot within a duration of time, or trying to use some type of contrast method, making your working sets feel lighter. But we'll continue. Another idea that I could also see with your primary exercises, predominantly in squats. This is going to be applied to your bench and your deadlifts as well. I'm just focusing on one singular day right now. But is any of the Shako programs, if you looked at any of them, they call for your primary exercise to be done at the end of your day as well. So you'll like there's some days where you'll squat twice in one workout. So you'll take like 5 sets of 3 out with 80%, and then once you're done with completing the rest of your workout, because you're probably going to bench, and then you do some assistance exercises, and then you come back, and then you could possibly do like 5 sets of 5 or 5 sets of 6 with 70%. And so that's something also I could see from this program as well, except that of course you have your squats, how you structured it, plus then you go down to your speed bench, and then after that you do your deficits. I would almost think that if you wanted it to structure it the way Shaco does, you could take your top set of 375, do your bench, and then take your 3 sets of 6 at 295 and put that where your deficit deads are. Uh, just to kind, I mean, just as a mimicry of Shaco's plan. Kind of going into a rule that I follow is I need the program to be sustainable over a duration of time until I make either a change or until I go for a max or something in of that nature. So when I look at a top set of 375 at 445, I just see a relatively small amount of volume, and then you getting into 3 sets of 6 at 295, with it being 65% or so. This is the way I would look at it. Of 445, I would almost say it would be too light. So I'm trying to find a good middle ground of trying. It's the difference between throwing a wiffle ball, which you could throw it as hard as you can, it's not going to go very far, or shot put, you could throw it as hard as you can, and it's not going to go very far, and then trying to throw a baseball, which I can throw. I mean, anyone can throw really, really far, relatively. So if I know that 375 is 85%, and I can hit it for 5 sets of 3, or 3 sets of 3, or say that you have like 3 sets of 5, then, and I know it's moving good, then I would stick with that, take out the 3 sets of 6, and then move on to your speed bench and then get to your deficits. That's how I would structure it. I just think that it's working two sides of a spectrum and not enough of either side of the spectrum. So I think there could be a bit of restructuring on that point of view. What I've noticed personally is, for my best bang for my buck, is sticking with like an 80% range for 5 sets of 3 for the most part, at 80%. And so that would just be a reduction of 20 pounds hitting. Instead of getting a top set of 5, you can get 5 sets of 3. So you just increase your volume technically, uh, technically by 3, because you just tripled the amount of reps that you just got with a total. So your ultimate tonnage, or your volume, has just increased significantly, and especially considering that it's a lighter weight, you can move it faster. So if you can move it faster, and that technically is the same idea of trying to get that optimal range category, then I would presume that you would see greater continuous growth over the course of the next 3 to 4 weeks, because that's how we would structure it in mesocycle. So every 4 weeks we would max again, but it would also take a little bit more stress off your body as well, because it's a lighter weight, and overall, being the mass that it is that it takes less toll on your body, uh, from my perspective. It's important to have higher percentage schemes as well, with less sets and less reps, but I mean, in due time. Of course, another way to looking at this is through the tonnage or the volume in general. If you were to take 375 and multiply it by 5, which is the amount of times that you squatted it, you would get 1,875 pounds, the total amount that you lifted for that top set. If you were to take 355, which is your 80%, times 15, which is 5 sets of 3, then you would be getting around a little over 5,300 pounds of total volume. And I understand that going into the idea of 295 for 18 total reps is around 5,000 pounds as well. We're still looking for that force velocity curve of throwing the wiffle ball, which is too light. So you objects at high velocity, too light, produce small amount of force. and you throw it, it's not going to go very far. You throw a shot put, it could be too heavy, and then you throw it, it's not going to go very far. We're trying to look for that baseball, and my baseball idea is through that 80%. But it's also the same thing with the idea of the dynamic effort day, which is they're ranging from 70 to 75% to 85%. And those ranges, they play around in those ranges. So it's also the way Chinese work. 90% of their work was done at 80%. So I'm always looking for those force velocity curves that I can mess with. So that's just my a bit of a take on your primary exercise for Sunday. And I don't want to, of course, get into too much with this, so I'm just going to stick with just the idea of my idea of what primary exercises are to me and how I treat primary exercises. Simply, this can be related to your Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. It's relatively, it's pretty much the same thing. So just a quick note on the speed bench at 50%, which is great, but it's also taking into consideration that there's accommodating resistance as far as what Dave Tate and Louis Simmons and all these guys say is if you're looking for a dynamic effort bench, make sure that you either have chain, an added amount of like 20 to 25% of chain, or 20% of your band or max band tension for band tension or something like that in order to increase the speed on the way down to increase the speed on the way up. You utilizing that idea, but the bar weight is at 50%, 55%, 60%. That's how they end up deciphering that. And then everything after that, as far as assistance and the deficit deads, I wouldn't even put a percentage on it. I would just do it in a way to just make sure that if I feel good, I'm going to hit it at this amount of reps and this amount of sets. It is all dependent on how I'm doing for the day. Do I feel like I need to work on my lower back, my hamstrings, my glutes, or my quads predominantly, or do I need to work on mobility? Do I need to work on upper back or rhomboid, rear delts? Of course, all those things, but as long as you can sustain it, that's the key. Make sure that everything is sustainable over the course and duration of time. But and of course I reference my Perlman's chart. I go back to my basics. Is this moving the way this percentage is supposed to move? And I can only determine that whether or not I continue to max. Not everything works. Everything works, but not everything works forever. I think that it looks good as concerning how at the beginning you are of your own programming. Less is more, of course. What I mean by that is less exercises you can actually predetermine what is actually working in your program instead of having a lot of stuff thrown in there. You're making progress, but you don't know necessarily what is working. So you could possibly condense it down just a little bit and then add more sets to your training. But other than that, that's pretty much all I have for your primary exercises, secondary, and assistance.